Hey, Slater Crusaders, America's the greatest country in the world. Welcome to our special America Divided, the Racism Hustle. Wherever you're watching us right now, thank you. But also, please download our app for your smartphone, and you can watch us on your phone anywhere at any time. If you can only catch part of the special now, or you want to watch parts of it again, you can do that on demand on our app. Just search for The First TV in the App Store, Apple, Android. It's all right there. There is, we got a ton to get to here because there is a very destructive message being pumped into the souls and hearts and brains of our kids and everyone today. And the only way to stop all this that's going on is to confront the inputs that media and academia are just shoving into our faces. And they've been doing it the last decade or so. I want to start off our special on this note. I want to read a letter here. I've read it from a couple parts of it before, but I just want to sit for a minute and read the whole thing here. It's from W.E.B. Du Bois. He's the first African-American to get a doctorate from Harvard in 1890. His only surviving child was Yolande. She turned 14 in 1914, and she was sent to a top-notch boarding school in England. So think about what's going on here, right? Black girl, about 50 years after the Civil War. Civil rights movement's still 50 years away. Women can't vote, right? So she's in a pretty difficult spot. And here's what he said after the intro, and I hope you're had a good trip, blah, blah, blah. He started to get to the advice. He says, above all, remember, dear, that you have a great opportunity. You're in one of the world's best schools, in one of the world's greatest modern empires. Millions of boys and girls all over the world would give almost anything that they possess to be where you are. You are there by no desert or merit of yours, but only by lucky chance. First of all, how true is still that very first sentence of people here in America today? Yet we forget. We talk about what a terrible, awful country we are. Yet millions of boys and girls all over the world would give anything that they possess to be where we are right here today. And also that point of you're here by lucky chance, right? What an interesting thing for a dad to say. I feel like if my dad told me that, maybe I'd be like demoralized by it a little bit, right? I don't know if it would make me want to work harder, but maybe it would. And I think here's why. This is why he said it with this follow-up here, right? So you don't deserve it, right? You didn't do anything to get there. This is lucky that you're there. Therefore, deserve it. Study. Do your work. Be honest, frank, and fearless, and get some grasp of the real values of life. You will meet, of course, curious little annoyances. People will wonder at your dear brown and your sweet crinkly hair. But that simply is of no importance and will soon be forgotten. Remember that most folk laugh at anything unusual, whether it's beautiful, fine, or not. How good is that advice? All right, to anyone who's discriminated against for any reason, right? W.E.B. Du Bois is like, you know what? No importance, right? And they're laughing at it. They're laughing at you because we laugh at things we're not used to. And that laughter, it's not a judgment on its beauty or importance. It's a reflection of their unfamiliarity with the thing. That's their problem, not yours. And I think today of how many these grand injustices that we're told about are simply things that even W.E.B. Du Bois would brush off as curious little annoyances. He goes on, you, however, must not laugh at yourself. You must know that brown is as pretty as white or prettier, and crinkly hair prettier as straight, even though it's harder to comb. The main thing is the you beneath the clothes and skin, the content of character, if I may. The ability to do, the will to conquer, the determination to understand and know this great, wonderful, curious world. Don't shrink from new experiences and custom. Take the cold bath bravely. Enter into the spirit of your big bedroom. Enjoy what is and don't pine for what is not. Read some good, heavy, serious books just for discipline. This is my favorite line. Take yourself in hand and master yourself. Make yourself do unpleasant things so as to gain the upper hand of your soul. And above all, remember your Father loves you and believes in you and expects you to be a wonderful woman. I shall write each week and expect a weekly letter from you. Lovingly yours, Papa. I mean, listen, we could pick any line from that, right? It's all amazing. But I just want to focus on that last line. Your Father loves you and believes in you and expects you to be a wonderful woman. If he just said, I expect you to be a wonderful woman, maybe that could come across a little harsh, right? I expect you to be a wonderful woman. But he started it with, first, I love you, and I believe in you. And then he sets the expectation. That's so beautiful. Maybe a lot of what we're seeing now is because parents, maybe many don't even say the I love you part, right? Or broken homes, whatever, kids may not feel it even if it's said. But maybe some parents just say I love you and that's it. And maybe other parents say I love you and I believe in you. But how many parents and how much of our culture ever goes to that next step that Du Bois did and sets an expectation? I expect you to be a wonderful woman. Right? I think a lot of parents and teachers and whoever might be afraid of that, right? Instead, it's all you, be yourself, right? No. Don't be yourself. You should be a way better version, actually. And you got to work on it. We all do. And notice he also says, I expect you to be a wonderful woman. He doesn't say, I expect you to become a wonderful lawyer, or I expect you to become a wonderful writer. So I expect you to become a wonderful woman, a person. How much of what we're dealing now is lack of direction, lack of purpose, lack of meaning, right? Young people striving for some identity that matters because we just let them blossom into whoever they are, right? Or some new age hooey. And now all they can think to do is tear down a statue and then confuse that with doing something of meaning. The fact is everyone is blessed beyond measure to be born and living here in America. You don't deserve it. It's luck. So deserve it. Get a grasp of the real values in life. Don't get distracted by the silly things. Take a cold bath bravely. Take yourself in hand and master yourself before you look to master others too. And before you let others master you. America Divided, the racism hustle, coming up right now. Glad you're here. Spread the word. Hey, Slater Crusaders, welcome to our special America Divided, the Racism Hustle. I want to kick off our special with our very own Rob Smith. He is the author of the upcoming book, Always a Soldier, Service, Sacrifice, and Coming Out as America's Favorite Black Gay Republican. Rob, how are you, brother?
I'm good, man. How you doing?
Good to talk to you. So I just want to throw it to you. Like, where's your head at with all this, man? What are you seeing?
Man, okay, so my like a lot of Americans, my head has been in a really crazy place over the last couple of weeks. We have had the riots. We've seen, I think, the best and worst of America in the past couple of weeks, because obviously the riots and everything was the worst. It was hard to watch American cities being destroyed. As you guys all know, I went down to Minneapolis early last week. I started a GoFundMe to help rebuild Minneapolis and the small businesses that were destroyed during the riots. We raised $125,000. So if anybody's still watching, You can go to that now. It's at all my social media handles at Rob Smith Online. So I went down there and I was on the ground in Minneapolis, and what I saw was absolute destruction, Mike. It was like being in a third world country. And I've been to war. I've been to Iraq. So I know what I'm talking about when it comes to this. So seeing that destruction was rough. Seeing all of America so divided was rough. But on the flip side, I went to the memorial for George Floyd, and there's an area where people interact and where people are coming together as a community, and where everybody's talking and going through their emotions and what they have to say. I saw church members that had come together to feed the community that now no longer has a grocery store, no longer has a pharmacy, no longer has all of these things. So when I say that you're seeing the best and worst of America, you're seeing that we obviously have a very long way to go in terms of race relations. And this was a very intense moment that we have all just gone through, that we're all still going through right now. But I see the future for America and the future for Americans coming together. And I want to focus a little bit on that positivity, on Americans coming together in spite of all this and after all this, because Mike, I believe in the promise of America. I'm doing everything that I'm doing right now because I love America and I love this country and I want to see this country work. We have to find a way to come together and move forward as Americans after this.
I hate how the media, it's so easy for the media to stand in front of something burning and it's easy for other people then to characterize that as America. and our future.
Yeah.
But no one ever
Yeah.
talks about the business owners and the people stepping up at the moment. Like, that's a beautiful story. Did you
Yeah.
get a chance to talk to any business owners, or did they all
did.
flee because their places were on fire?
No, I did get to talk to a couple of business owners. I talked to one business owner and one local, and one lady's story that I'll share. Her name is Mary. Mary, her business wasn't necessarily affected by the riots because she wasn't on. In Minneapolis, there's this street. It's called Lake Street, and that's where everything had been destroyed. So Mary wasn't on that street, but Mary is unafraid to go to her thrift store that she owns and to reopen because she doesn't know when there's going to be more unrest. So I talked to her. We're going to help her out via the GoFundMe. But a lot of people, honestly, a lot of these small business owners have fled. There's some really great stories about some GoFundMes helping other small business owners, which is great. But Mike, what I saw with my own two eyes, and I think that you have seen some of that video that has been broadcast out on the first, because I shot some stuff when I was down there. What I saw will take decades to rebuild. Affordable housing complexes burned down. Target, Walgreens, AutoZone, small businesses. It's really, really bad, and it's going to take a really long time to build up.
Yep, and the media will be long gone before.
The media will be
that
long
ever.
gone. And the irritating thing to me about this entire thing, Mike, is that the media ran cover for these riots. The mainstream media doesn't show the Black lives that were lost during these riots. People like David Dorn, people like Officer Patrick Underwood, all of the small business owners who are also Black that had their lives and livelihood destroyed. These people are running cover for this, okay? And it's a sad commentary on where our American media stands right now, that our wonderful viewers can't count on the Fox, not the Fox, but the CNNs and the MSNBCs and all that stuff to get those stories out. So they come to people like you and I because they know they're going to get the whole truth from us.
Yep, absolutely. Your book obviously talks about your story and you becoming a conservative. What are you hoping? Is there a chance that other people could see what's going on and become conservative or start to question at least narratives out of all this? Or do you see more people becoming brainwashed and joining the cult and, being all anti-racist and falling that direction? Where do you see people headed because of all this?
Well, I'll tell you what, Mike, the weirdest thing, not the weirdest thing, but something that happened throughout all of this is my social media following and my platforms has completely exploded with all of this. Wow. I think that this is a major red pill moment for a lot of people. And as I talk about it in my book, Always a Soldier, I have, it's 70% memoir about my time spent in the military and 30% political commentary about the moment that we're living in right now. And I have a chapter called The Kanye Effect, Why Black Americans Are Leaving Democrats Behind. At a certain point, Black Americans are opening their eyes to the games that the left plays. And we're finding out right now that a lot of the donations that are going to Black Lives Matter are being filtered through fundraising platforms that raise money for Democratic candidates. So everybody donating in Black Lives Matter, this money is being funneled to the Democratic Party, right? So we're finding out that all of this is just the front for the Democrats to say, hey, Black people, look, we see you, be angry, be mad, be upset, and also vote for Joe Biden in November. Yeah. So we're starting to see the scales on people's eyes fall, thanks to people like you, thanks to people like me, thanks to a lot of other people that exist outside of that mainstream media narrative. And I think that these riots, or a certain subset of Black Americans that are free thinking, maybe they're independent leaning, maybe they're old school liberals and they're not leftists. But this is a major red pill moment for a lot of those people because I've been seeing it in my own following exploding.
Good. Now, on the flip side, what do you say about all the white guilt that we've been seeing out there?
Number one, the pandering is outrageous. I don't need Chuck Schumer and Nancy Pelosi kneeling in kente cloth. It's ridiculous. and at a certain point, this is what I think. I think that on the left, there's always a message of dependency and victimhood. And people like Nancy Pelosi, people like Chuck Schumer, and even to the bottom level, like you've seen internet videos of these white Black Lives Matter supporters washing protesters' feet. Like, it's completely insane. Mike, would you ever wash a black protester's feet? Do you have such a lack of self-respect that you would ever do that in life?
Yeah. No is the answer.
No, exactly. So I don't think all of this helps. I think it's pandering.
Yeah.
What Democrats don't have is they don't have real solutions for Black Americans. I believe 110%, and I will never not believe that the answer to anybody's empowerment is always via financial. It's always via entrepreneurship. The Democrats do not have that message to sell to Black America. So what do they sell again? Fear, victimhood, reparations. This is what we're going to be going through for the next, how long is it till election? Another 5 months?
Yeah, 5 months or so. Yeah, so it's good.
I think Black Americans are not going to fall for this. And I think that there is going to be a reckoning after the November election, because the Democrats are throwing everything that they have into this narrative, and it's still not going to be enough.
Could you imagine if Trump wins again? Good night. People would flip. All right, I got like 30 seconds, but you personally, did you want your white friends to text you or call you or ask how you're doing, or what did you personally want?
You know what? I'm lucky enough to have white friends who don't feel the need to pander to me when this stuff happens, because they treat me like a human being 100% of the time. So I thank God that I don't have any white friends that have texted me and pandered in that way, because they treat me like a human being. There's an opportunity for us to discuss race in a real way, absolutely, but neither side needs to pander.
Rob Smith online on the Twitter, of course, Facebook, all the rest. And then the book, Always a Soldier, Service Sacrifice, coming out as America's favorite Black gay Republican. Rob, you're the man. Thanks for going to Minneapolis. Thanks for sharing that story and getting that message out there, man.
Absolutely, Mike. Thanks for having me.
Appreciate you. Good stuff. Rob Smith's the man. Okay, coming up, Dr. Carol Swain's going to be here. So we're going to talk about the academic, intellectual, giant intellectual underpinnings of what's going on right now. It's coming up on our special, America Divided, the Racism Hustle. Spread the word. Hey, Slater Crusaders, welcome back to our special America Divided. I want to get to one of my favorite guests, Dr. Carol Swain. She's a former tenured professor at Princeton and Vanderbilt universities. She is now a part of the 1776 Unites Project, which is counter to the 1619 Project from the New York Times, which you know all about. She's also at Black Voices for Trump and Mighty American Strike Force. So many great groups. Dr. Carol Swain, how are you, Professor?
I am doing great despite all the turmoil that's taking place in our nation, and the fact that so many people are looking for answers, whether or not you encounter them, in your day-to-day life, or they're calling you or someone like me for an interview.
Well, that's where I wanted to start, Professor. I just want to ask you, just where's your, maybe we can start, where's your heart at, and then where's your head at with all of this? What are you seeing?
Well, first of all, I have been studying race in many ways all of my life, even though in academia, I started off as a congressional scholar. But in 2002, I wrote a book titled The New White Nationalism in America, Its Challenge to Integration, published by Cambridge Press. Now, with that book, I warned that America was headed in the wrong direction, and that there were some legitimate grievances that people had that were not being properly addressed. And that if we didn't move away from identity politics and all the focus on multiculturalism, that we were going to reach a point of great conflict and turmoil in America. And so the book was published in 2002. But when President Obama was elected, I saw race relations, the worst thing of it, accelerate. And it was headed in the wrong direction long before President Trump was elected. And so it bothers me so much when I hear people say that he's a white supremacist, he's a white nationalist, he's the cause of this conflict. No, this conflict predates him. And that's part of what I see. I see these things unfolding. I see people moving in the wrong direction when it comes to solutions.
Because you've lived in academia land, you've seen it, as you said, a long, long time ago. So what did you see like in the year 2000 that gave you cause for alarm that we're now seeing the fruit of today?
Well, back then, I noticed that there were a lot of hate crimes, and they were not being committed by any one particular group, but they were high profile crimes where people went out and shot others of different races. And it involved a black man as well as, whites. Jews were targeted at times. And so that concerned me, and that was a factor in me writing The New White Nationalism in America. What I see taking place today is that the critical race theorists, they're driving the narrative. And the race relations in America could be a lot better if the narrative wasn't out there. In many ways, it's a false narrative that America is an evil country, that it's racist to the core, and that white supremacy dominates, and that that we can't get along. And what I see is that this narrative is destructive. It causes hopelessness because they're getting in school, all of this stuff about white privilege, white supremacy, black victimization, oppression, and it's discouraging. I was successful despite coming from poverty because I believed in America, the American dream, that if I worked hard enough, it would make a difference. Young people are being told today that because of racism and because they are oppressed, that there's nothing they can do. And it is a lie, that white police officers, just routinely shoot black men. In fact, the studies show that the police officer is more in danger of being killed by a black man than his killing one. And so the numbers that are being, um, black people have internalized because it's a critical narrative that they are being oppressed and victimized at a level that I don't think is true. In fact, I know it's not true. And that's discouraging because so many people believe it, so many educated people believe it. For some, it's a political agenda. For others in the communities that are hurting, they're believing what they're being told by black elites that have a vested interest in bringing down America because they're connected with leftist causes. There's a lot of money to be made on race.
Yeah. Oh, okay. There's so many things here. There's so much stuff here. Okay. Let me ask you this. Let's take a I don't know what age, a 5-year-old, 10-year-old boy or girl living in the inner city, and there's two parallel universes. In one universe, they're fed critical race theory, and then in the other universe, their inputs are Dr. Carol Swain and her message. What do those differences do to that boy's or girl's soul? And then how does it change their behavior and their life outcomes, you would say?
Well, since you mentioned soul, then I will say that I think part of what is taking place is those that are getting the message that racism is so bad, and white people are suppressing you. They've set up this system that no matter how hard you work, nothing can happen for you. That person is not going to have the motivation to get out there and try. And I think about my own situation. I was a high school dropout. I was one of 12, married at 16, had my first child at 17, um, got a GED, went to community college and got the first of 5 degrees. I became a professor. But if I had believed those things, if I had believed the things that I was taught in graduate school, I don't think I would have tried. I don't think I would have, gotten out of bed. Um, it was so discouraging because by the time I got to graduate school and I started studying theories of oppression, I had already disproven, their whole foundation because the sociological studies told me that because, my parents were alcoholics, that I would become an alcoholic, I would repeat the cycle, and that systemic racism would have kept me oppressed. I worked very hard to be an honest student. I worked, and most people are not going to believe this, but it is the God truth. They can check it out. When I was getting my 4-year degree at Roanoke College in Salem, Virginia, where I graduated magna cum laude, I was working 40 hours a week at the community college library, nights and weekends. It was a great job. I could bring my children when I needed to. And I was an honest student because I worked hard and I was willing to work. And I think now people are being told that it doesn't matter how hard you work. And what I found that if my race has disadvantaged me, and so I'll say, I mean, there's the belief if you got black skin, you're disadvantaged. I can say that as a bright black person, I think I was benefited by my race because maybe people had low expectations. They saw a hardworking black woman, a black student, and I think that it certainly helped to open doors. But I worked very hard, and for me, it was during this affirmative action era, and I always wanted, to be able to prove myself so that people wouldn't say that my accomplishments were because of my race. And so I
Yes.
worked very, very hard, and then I learned that it doesn't matter what you do; people are going to say that anyway. But I don't care. But I do care about the negative message that's being uh, uh, indoctrinated into young people, white and black, that's false. And so I care about the white person that's being told that because of something there, and no, not even, they're not even saying ancestors anymore. They're saying
Yeah.
everyone has white privilege, everyone benefits from whiteness, and you're responsible for the system. And there's a shaming that takes place that is racist. And I realize that the political left has redefined the definition of racism, but I believe that any racial or ethnic group can be a racist, they can be prejudiced, and that is harmful to everyone. And I don't want white children to be harmed or shamed because of their race any more than I would want that for blacks, Hispanics, Asians, or any other group.
Yep. What, I'm sure you've been called every name in the book, Professor, traitor, and all the rest. What do you say to someone who says, sure, well, someone doesn't have, most black people or whatever, someone may not be as smart as you, as intelligent as you, or capable as you are, Professor, to still come from a difficult background and not commit crime and go to school and work hard. And other people can't overcome these obstacles of a white supremacist or a difficult nation. What do you say to that?
Well, it's just, I think it's ludicrous. And then I get accused, what I get accused of most of the time is, oh, you benefited from the system. You benefited, from being a black conservative. And no, it's cost me greatly. If I were not a black conservative, I'd still be at the university. I would have endowed chairs. I never got an endowed chair. And there were blacks that had far less credentials than me. I won the highest prize in my profession, been cited by the U.S. Supreme Court. I was never recognized for that because once I had a Christian conversion experience and once I was seen as a conservative, then it was like over for my career. I was a Democrat most of my career, and it was like 2009 when I became a Republican. But my views were always different from everyone else, and that gave me an advantage in academia. I'm able to see things that other people can't see. And the name
Yes.
calling doesn't bother me. I've been called probably every name under the book. Aunt Jane, she's Uncle Tom's counterpart. And I don't care. I care about all Americans, and I believe that God has elevated me. He has positioned me. He's given me a message, and that message is the only thing that's going to save America. It's not going to be giving money to Black Lives Matter or any
No.
of those.
Okay, let me ask you this.
Trying to erase.
This is a tough question. I'm going to put you in a tough spot here, Professor. I'm going to ask you to be my therapist here for a minute. So,
right.
ton of white guilt going around, right? My personal defense mechanism when difficult things happen in my life is to compare myself to people who have it worse. I don't know if that's a super healthy thing to do, or if it's the right thing to do, but I do it. Like when my dad died a couple years ago, I said, well, that's awful. He died too young, but my friend, his dad died when he was 5. So I'm grateful because of that, right? I don't know if that's healthy or good, but that's kind of my knee-jerk. So we're all supposed to, white people are supposed to apologize and at the very least, ask their black friends or black coworkers, how are you, or whatever. And when I hear a story of something that happened in a black friend's life, that's like a slight. It's like a small, it seems to me, racist white person, like a slight. And I'm like, well, I mean, you mentioned Uncle Tom. Have you heard the story of Josiah Henson? Right. So I don't know if that's super healthy. I mean, I want to bring it to you, be like, wow, geez, how am I supposed to interpret someone's race and a racist encounter that they had in their life that it's not a Klan experience. It's like an ignorant person experience. Does that make sense? What I'm blabbering now, but does that make sense?
Well, there are two things going on. For one thing, none of us we don't get to choose race, color, our parents. And so people that were born into families of with two-parent families that were able to provide for them a good education or wealth, I mean, that I don't have a problem with that because we don't get to choose, and so we don't get to choose our skin color. And I don't think white people need to walk around, guilt-ridden because they happen to not be poor or they weren't born as a racial or ethnic minority. And one of the saddest things I'm seeing these days are these forums where white people have their hands up, begging for forgiveness, or they're down on a knee, in front of black people, and that's supposed to mean something. I think that's very troubling. And I think that we, as a Christian, I believe that all people were made in God's image, and that, that the creation and humankind, that there is diversity and the diversity is good. And as a black descendant of slaves, that was the vehicle that got my people to this country. Blacks in America have been better off than blacks all over the world. And the poorest black, compared to people that are in third world nations, they are blessed to be in this country. And those people who are out there trying to destroy America because America is so evil, they're not going to like what they end up with. If they continue the nonsense, we're going to end up falling to another nation. They don't believe it can happen. I believe it can happen. And you take your pick. Do you want to fall to China or do you want to fall to Russia? I believe the Russians would be kinder to us than the Chinese, but they don't realize what they're playing with. Some of them don't. And some
Yeah.
people are very innocent. They're really hurting, but they're
Yep.
being manipulated by the hardcore political left, and they have blinders on when it comes to the Democratic Party. And that's very sad because if you think about the Democratic Party and the Planned Parenthood and Margaret Sanger and how those abortion clinics are in minority communities, the black community is being exterminated. And this whole move to defund the police, that's ridiculous because the crime is greatest in the black community, in the
Yep.
minority communities. You defund the police, and if it meant that policing decreases, then more people are going to die, not just in the
Yep.
black community, but across America. And those who want a race war, there are some people on both sides who want a race war. They may get it. They're not going to like it.
Professor, I could talk to you all day. I'm super grateful for you and your message, and thanks for being here. I hope we can do it again. So, Dr. Carol Swain, should we ask people to go to the 1776 Unites website? Is that the best place to read more about all this?
Well, if you really want to see a positive message for America, you go to 1776 Unite. If you want to follow me and know what I'm doing, I have two websites. Be the People News instead of We the People. BeThePeopleNews.com. I have a podcast and a blog there, and I'm on Twitter and Facebook and Parler as Carol M. Swain.
Okay, beautiful. Everyone follow all that. Dr. Swain, it's an honor. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Have a wonderful day. America Divided. More coming up. Spread the word. Hey, Slater Crusaders, welcome back to our special America Divided. I want to culminate our time here together with a voice that I'm very grateful for, Jack Brewer. He's a professor at Fordham University and the CEO of the Brewer Group. Jack Brewer, how are you doing, brother?
Man, I'm good. Praying for our nation and just hoping we can come together and, excited to be on your show. Thanks for allowing my voice to be heard and praying for you as well.
Thank you, brother, and I appreciate that. And I'm grateful for your voice, as I said, because I feel like there's so much anger and hate and division, and it's got to stop. And there's a message of unity out there that we need, and you have. So let me start this. I heard you say the other day that there's a time in your life where you hated white people. So you had hate in your heart, and now you don't. So I'd love it if you could just take a couple minutes and walk us through that process, where it came from, and how you got rid of it.
Yeah, man, I grew up in Texas. I humble beginnings, but a family that was full of love. And when I was 13 years old, a fraction of the skinheads moved into my town. I didn't even know what a skinhead was, and then all of a sudden, I'm being called all kind of racial names and getting threatened every day at school. And so, that was a tough period of my life, and it, lasted for a couple of years. Uh, and so, when you start going through those type of things, obviously the feelings and emotions that you have in your heart is anger. I started carrying a gun for the first time, man, to protect myself from these people. My parents didn't even know I had it. And so, eventually one of my friends had to shoot one of them, shot him in his neck, put the kid in a coma.
Wow.
Because they were breaking into his house, a bunch of skinheads. So he ended up getting acquitted, but I had to go through the trial. And so, man, this was a scarring situation as a kid to go through that, and I grew up, my parents are from a small black area in our town, but around us is a lot of white people. I mean, it wasn't like I was in an all black area. So, it was tough, man. I had hate in my heart towards white people for a long time, man. And, what ended up happening is, as things started to progress and the city started to take a stance, my neighbors around me who were white started coming and supporting my family and actually help us pass the laws to end, end the skinheads being able to be allowed in our schools and wear the swastikas and, wear the white shoestrings in the shoes and all of those things. So it was a trying time, man. This was covered in the national media, and back then, we didn't have social media, so people kind of pushed it under the rug. But it really divided my. It was tough.
When did you realize, oh, this hate in my heart's not going to lead me, let alone our society, to a good place? When did that happen?
I mean, when I saw those people take a stand, or my family take a stand for Black people in my community and say, we're not putting up with this. We love y'all. My coaches, my youth coaches took a stand for me. As I started to go into high school, I was in the 8th grade when it started. And so 8th and 9th grade and 10th grade, my coaches took a stand for me. And so now, these are some of the people that pray for me to this day and love me to this day. And so, really it goes back to Christ, and it goes back to being able to, be one body in Christ, and we're all brothers and sisters. And so I really learned a valuable lesson at a young age. And it's really the reason I speak the way that I do today, and why I am so bold when it comes to standing up for Christ and not allowing racial divisions to divide us, because I know Satan was in those skinheads, right? My dad went to a KKK rally to protect me. I know that in my town, had a KKK rally in my town. And I'm not that old, right? This is the mid 90s. And so I know what real racism looks like. I know what white supremacy looks like. So I get offended when I hear people just freely throwing around the word white supremacist, talking about people in our nation. And most of them have never even seen or had to interact with a real white supremacist. And so, it's just that divisive talk that we need to get away from in our nation, and we need to get back closer to God and start being brothers and sisters in Christ again.
I want to stay on that theme, but you mentioned something. I want to divert for a second. When you hear all this talk about we live in a white supremacist nation and, all that stuff. So what's your response to that as you've seen, you said real racism, or real white supremacy? What do you say to someone who, says we live in a white supremacist country?
First off, watch your words, I travel all around the world. I've spent extensive time in Africa and Haiti. Those are the places that I enjoy being. I love being in countries like that, just because you can make such an impact. And so to hear talk like that, when the truth is, in most parts of the world, people have it so bad, man. And it's just like, don't create that reality when you live in a nation where, an African American can go out and get an education, can start a business, can do these things. Do we have some oppressions? Do we have racism in certain fragments of our society? Yes. but this country allows for us to make improvements there. It allows for us to even the playing field, or at least make progress towards it. And so we can't discount that. To label someone as a white supremacist is basically putting them in the category of people that lynch, people that burn crosses in blacks' yards, people that have hung black men and women. I mean, this is ridiculous. It has to stop. I get offended by it because I've had to go look skinheads in the eye every day that were calling me names like porch monkey and all color other racial slurs and threatening to kill me and my family. I've had to go through that, and most people haven't. And so I just think it's disrespectful to our fellow brothers and sisters. I mean, we have a lot of godly people that are white. We have a lot of. You look now across the country, most of the people marching are white people. And so to make people feel like they can't express themselves, ask questions, be concerned, discounting their love and discounting their concerns is just not right.
So I made the claim on the show that I'm not sure Martin Luther King Jr., like I don't know if my grandkids will know Martin Luther King Jr. I think he's going to be removed from history because, first of all, it's the Reverend Martin Luther King Jr., and the Reverend's been taken out of his name, right? Now it's just MLK. His message of unity and not judging people by their color, but content of their color, like all that stuff, like none of that stuff is compatible with the message of the activists today. So I don't know if he'll be around much. So that being said, what of the Reverend Martin Luther King Jr.'s message do you think is most lacking today?
I think what you just said, the fact that they've removed God from his message. It's the same thing that they've done in our schools. It's the same thing that they've done in the policies that a lot of the folks on the left have tried to push. The removal of God is the tragic portion of what we're seeing right now is that Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was Reverend Martin Luther King Jr. He was a man of God. He marched with his Bible. He quoted scripture. And when he said, "Let freedom ring," this man was anointed by the Father in heaven. And so when he was talking about the color of your skin, you can go back to scripture and talk about, all nations coming together. The scripture doesn't specifically say anything about race for a reason. And that's because it in God's eyes, we're all his children, right? And so it tells us to love each other as thyself, and it never speaks about the color of someone's skin. And so we know that is a evil, demonic act from Satan. And so to try to make this into something of the flesh and deny the fact that racism is evil. Racism is an evil spirit, and we can't take on these evil spirits unless we take them on in the spirit. If we stay in the flesh, then we're really denouncing the name of Martin Luther King, because that's not what he was about. He prayed about these things. So I think it's important for our kids to understand that. No, he's not just going to kneel down. Dr. Martin Luther King kneeled down before God and humbled himself before his Father. And I think that is a message that's lost right now as our society and our culture tries to water things down and really suppress the message of God.
Man, I know you're speaking truth, because there's a couple scriptures that I was reminded of as you were talking there, but Ephesians 6:12 stands out. We're not fighting against flesh and blood enemies, but against evil rulers and authorities of the unseen world. I love taking the idea of racism away from a flesh battle and turning it into a spiritual battle, which is what it actually is. That's awesome. What principles, Jack, did your parents teach you growing up that have really stuck with you and made you a successful man?
My mom always taught me that you find truth through the Word of God. And I think, whenever you have a society and you have children who they think they can find their truth through social media, they can find their truth through the car they want to aspire to get when they're a kid, or the bike they want to get for Christmas. Those things are okay. Kids are going to always want things. But you got to put the Word of God in your kid. We know Scripture tells us that in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. That's John 1:1. So if the Word is God, then we have to meditate on the word day and night. He tells us that in Joshua 1 and 8, tells us that throughout the Bible. Psalms 91, right? We have to dwell in the secret place of the Most High, right? And those that do that shall abide under the shadow of the Almighty. And so for me, God puts that truth in me, and my mom taught me that. And so I think that's what we see as a society now, is that our feelings started to get involved and our emotions start to get involved. And what that means is that we're in the flesh. If your emotions are involved in something, and you're making those decisions upon yourself, you are in the flesh. In order to be in the spirit, you have to humble yourself, which means you have to remove your ego. And to remove your ego from something means that you have to go to God and be humble enough to say, I don't have the answers. God, can you show me what those answers are? And that's living a spiritual life. And I think there's just so many of our kids that if they hear me say that, they had no idea what I'm talking about. And that's sad. And that's the society we live in, because, there's social media platforms and there's the music that they take into their ear that feeds their spirit versus God feeding their spirit. I mean, you're watching it before your eyes. Think about throwing Molotov cocktails in the police cars and burning up police cars, burning up churches, burning up thousands of businesses, and taking selfies in front of these. We're watching a video game. We're watching that video game that they play, that evil video game that they play, where they run around and blow up stuff. We're watching that before our eyes on TV, and it's just terrible.
Yeah, so right. Grand Theft Auto. That's what I couldn't think of these when you said it. I was like, I know what he's talking about. Grand Theft Auto. Last question for you, Jack. Got about a minute or so. I'd like to think that if I was at your school back in the 90s in Texas, that I'd come to your defense against the skinheads, right? What's a white person to do now in this society, especially one, and take this in the right way, please, like when someone's like, oh, I had this awkward encounter, and they liken it to the encounters you had with skinheads, right? Like, what am I supposed to do when I'm told you got to be either anti-racist or you are a racist? How's a white person to navigate this?
I've gotten this question from a lot of people that have just opened up to me because they're searching for answers. They're searching for, how do I talk to my kids? How do I respond to my Black friends at work? What do I say? I don't like when I see white people become so apologetic that it gets them away from the real issue. And the real issue is serving thy neighbor and loving thy neighbor as thyself. And so it goes back to service for me. I think, if I could give white America an advice, is to leave out of your neighborhoods, go into the inner cities. Let's not get lost where this conversation needs to be. This conversation needs to stay on the poor, on the most underserved in America. And that just happens to be our Black folk. And so I want to see white men and women go out into the community, these community centers, go out and adopt a kid. If you have a son or daughter, bring a friend so that they can play with a person of color that may be of lesser means. That's how we truly bridge the gap, is to do what Jesus told us to do, and that's to serve the underserved and serve the oppressed and help out the poor. That's all we have to do. Our words are great, but we have to live our words through the work of our hands. We have to physically go out there and do these things and touch these communities. And white, Black, green, or purple, we can all do that.
You're the man. Jack Brewer, CEO of the Brewer Group, professor of Fordham. Thank you, brother. Keep preaching.
Thank you. God bless you, man.
America divided, and no longer if we follow Jack's wisdom and God's. Mike Slater, spread the word.